Imagine waking up and discovering that one military strike was never really about the strike itself. It was about information. It was about signaling. It was about revealing something much bigger than bombs falling from the sky. Because that may be exactly what happened when tensions between Israel and Iran escalated once again. At first glance, the story looked simple. Israel carried out military operations linked to Iranian interests. Iran responded. Missiles were launched. Headlines exploded across international media. Politicians rushed to social media. Analysts appeared on television screens offering instant explanations. But guys, look carefully at what happened. Sometimes the most important part of a conflict is not who fired first. It is not even who fired back. The most important part is what each side learned. And that is where this story becomes much more interesting. Most people naturally focus on destruction. They count damaged buildings. They count casualties. They count military assets. Strategists count something different. They count capabilities. They count reactions. They count timing. And they count information. Because in modern warfare, information can be just as valuable as missiles. Think about it. If you are a military planner sitting in Washington, Tel Aviv, Beijing, Moscow, or Tehran, what do you want more than anything else? You want to know what your opponent is actually capable of doing. Not what they claim, not what analysts estimate, not what intelligence reports guess. You want to know the real number. You want to know how many missiles exist. You want to know how quickly they can be launched. You want to know how effective they are. You want to know how well air defenses perform against them. And sometimes the only way to find out is during an actual confrontation. That is why this entire episode may be far more significant than many people realize. The public discussion has largely focused on political drama. Did Israel act independently? Did Washington approve? Was there disagreement behind the scenes? Was there coordination? These questions matter. But there may be an even bigger question. What exactly was learned during this exchange? Now think about this. For years, there has been enormous debate surrounding Iran's missile capabilities. Different governments have offered different estimates. Some reports suggested Iran's arsenal had been significantly weakened. Others argued Tehran retained substantial military capacity despite sanctions, pressure, and previous conflicts. The problem is that nobody outside a small circle of decision-makers truly knows. Military capabilities are among the most closely guarded secrets in the world. Governments routinely exaggerate their strength. Sometimes they understate it. Sometimes they deliberately create uncertainty, because uncertainty itself becomes a weapon. And that uncertainty has surrounded Iran for years. How many missiles remain? How quickly can they be deployed? How sustainable are military operations during a prolonged conflict? These are questions that influence strategic calculations across the entire Middle East. Then suddenly, a confrontation occurs. Missiles are launched. Radar systems activate. Air defense networks engage. Satellites track movements. Electronic intelligence platforms begin collecting data. And immediately, everyone involved starts learning. This is important. When missiles fly, they do not just travel toward targets. They generate information. Every launch provides data. Every interception provides data. Every defensive response provides data. Military planners study flight paths, reaction times, launch patterns, command structures, communication networks, everything. In many ways, real-world military engagements become giant intelligence-gathering exercises. And some analysts believe that is exactly why this latest exchange matters so much. Because regardless of who initiated what, the confrontation may have revealed pieces of Iran's actual military capabilities. Capabilities that had previously existed largely behind a curtain. Now, does that mean anyone suddenly knows everything? Of course not. Military secrets remain military secrets. But every confrontation reduces uncertainty. Every exchange reveals something. And when uncertainty decreases, strategic calculations change. Here is where geopolitics enters the picture. Many people view the Middle East through a regional lens. Israel versus Iran, Iran versus Gulf states, various regional rivalries. But major powers rarely think that way. They think globally. Washington thinks globally. Beijing thinks globally. Moscow thinks globally. And that changes everything. Because Iran is not merely a Middle Eastern country. It occupies one of the most strategically important positions on Earth. Look at the map. Iran sits near major energy routes. It influences access to key maritime corridors. It connects regions that are critical to global trade. Its relationships extend beyond the Middle East. Its energy exports matter. Its partnerships matter. Its geography matters. Now ask yourself a simple question. If Iran's military strength changes significantly, who notices? The answer is everyone. Energy markets notice. Investors notice. Defense ministries notice. China notices. Russia notices. The United States notices. This is why every military exchange involving Iran attracts worldwide attention, because the implications stretch far beyond the immediate battlefield. Here is where things become even more fascinating. Modern geopolitics increasingly revolves around competition between major powers. The United States remains the world's most influential military power. China continues expanding its economic reach. Russia seeks to preserve strategic influence across multiple regions. These competitions intersect in unexpected places, and one of those places is the Middle East. Energy remains critical, shipping remains critical, trade routes remain critical. Even in an age of technology and artificial intelligence, access to energy still shapes strategic thinking. Countries may talk about innovation, they may talk about digital economies, but underneath it all, energy continues powering industrial systems, transportation networks, and military forces. That reality has not disappeared. And because it has not disappeared, the Middle East remains extraordinarily important. Now think about what happens when uncertainty emerges around a major energy-producing region. Markets react. Insurance costs react. Investment decisions react. Governments react. Suddenly, a regional military exchange becomes a global economic event. That is why investors monitor these developments so closely. They are not merely watching missiles, they are watching risk. And risk affects money. Money affects politics. Politics affects strategy. Everything becomes interconnected. Here is where many surface-level explanations fall short. They often portray geopolitical events as isolated incidents. One strike, one response, one crisis, then another, then another. But real strategic competition rarely works that way. Major powers think in terms of long-term positioning. They think in terms of leverage. They think in terms of influence. And they think in terms of opportunities. Every crisis becomes part of a larger picture. Every confrontation creates new realities. Every reaction changes future calculations. This is why analysts spend so much time studying patterns rather than individual events, because patterns reveal intentions. Patterns reveal priorities. Patterns reveal strategy, and strategy is ultimately what matters. Now let me ask you something. What if this entire episode was not primarily about immediate military gains? What if the greater significance lies in what each side learned afterward? That possibility deserves serious attention. Military planners do not simply assess whether missiles hit targets. They assess performance. How many were launched? How many arrived? How many were intercepted? How quickly were defenses activated? What vulnerabilities appeared? These questions shape future decisions. And future decisions shape future conflicts. This creates a fascinating dynamic. Every confrontation becomes both a contest and a classroom. Everyone involved is simultaneously fighting and learning. Everyone is updating assumptions. Everyone is revising calculations. Everyone is preparing for what may come next. That process never stops, and it extends far beyond the Middle East, because information gathered today may influence decisions years from now. A missile launch today could affect military procurement plans tomorrow. An interception today could influence defense budgets next year. A strategic lesson learned today could shape alliances for an entire decade. That is how geopolitics works. The consequences often arrive long after the headlines disappear. Now think about another dimension: domestic politics. Leaders rarely operate in a vacuum. They face audiences, voters, political rivals, institutional pressures, public expectations. Every major decision must be viewed through that lens as well. A leader may need to appear strong. Another leader may need to appear cautious. One government may emphasize deterrence. Another may emphasize restraint. Public messaging becomes part of the strategy. And sometimes that messaging creates the impression of disagreement, even when broader interests overlap. That possibility is worth considering carefully. Because politics is not only about actions, it is also about perceptions. Perceptions influence public support. Public support influences political survival. Political survival influences strategic choices. Everything is connected. Now look ahead. What happens next? That is the question everyone wants answered. The honest answer is that nobody knows with certainty. Anyone claiming certainty is oversimplifying a very complicated situation. However, several possibilities exist. One possibility is controlled escalation. Each side signals strength while avoiding a wider conflict. Another possibility is prolonged tension. Neither side backs down completely, but neither side seeks full-scale war. A third possibility involves unexpected miscalculation. History teaches us that conflicts sometimes expand not because leaders desire expansion, but because events spiral beyond original intentions. That risk always exists, especially when multiple actors are involved, especially when domestic politics become intense, especially when military forces remain on high alert. This is why observers should pay close attention to actions rather than rhetoric. Statements matter, but actions matter more. Deployments matter more. Economic measures matter more. Military preparations matter more. These are often the clearest indicators of future direction. So when you step back and examine the bigger picture, the story becomes far more complex than a simple exchange between Israel and Iran. It becomes a story about intelligence gathering, strategic signaling, energy security, great power competition, military adaptation, political messaging, economic consequences, and the constant search for advantage in an increasingly competitive world. That is why this episode matters. Not because it produced dramatic headlines, not because politicians exchanged accusations, not because social media erupted with instant opinions. It matters because it offered a glimpse into how modern geopolitics actually works. A world where information is power, a world where perception is power, a world where military actions generate strategic knowledge, a world where regional events can produce global consequences. And perhaps most importantly, a world where what happens behind the scenes may ultimately matter more than what appears on television screens. Because at the end of the day, governments are not simply reacting to events. They are learning from them. They are calculating. They are adjusting. They are preparing. And every missile launched, every interception recorded, every political statement delivered becomes another piece of a much larger geopolitical puzzle. The real question is not whether this latest confrontation changed the Middle East overnight. The real question is what everyone learned from it, because those lessons, more than the strikes themselves, may shape what comes next.